Before we start, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional owners of this land, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. Hello everyone, and welcome to our group presentation, Homelessness, a Multidimensional Approach. We are Roy, Ashik, Pritam, Sam, Sadia, Priyanka, and Rahik, and today we will explore how homelessness, a complex and multifaceted social issue, can be better understood and addressed through three critical theoretical lenses: structural theory, feminist theory, and the human rights perspective. We'll also showcase how these theories inform real-world interventions and policy recommendations. Let's begin by looking at the current scope of homelessness in Australia and globally. Homelessness in Australia affects more than 116,000 people every night, according to Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. This includes not only those sleeping rough, but also individuals in insecure, temporary, or overcrowded housing. On a global scale, over 1.6 billion people live in substandard or unsafe housing, which speaks to the enormity of the issue. Homelessness is not just about lacking shelter, it intersects deeply with mental health conditions, experiences of trauma and domestic violence, systemic economic inequality, and for some populations such as Indigenous Australians, it reflects broader historical and structural disadvantages. These interconnections highlight why homelessness is not just a housing issue, it is a critical social justice issue. The three main theories are structural, feminist, and human rights perspectives. So in structural theory, we see examine systemic issues like poverty and lack of affordable housing as root causes of homelessness. Feminist theory addresses gender disparities and homelessness and significant impact of domestic violence. Human rights perspectives views housing as fundamental right with corresponding legal obligations for governments and institutions. And you can see over here how these three theories intersect with each other. Here we explore why homelessness is a critical issue from three interconnected lenses: mental health, systemic inequality, and social justice. Firstly, from a mental health perspective, more than 30% of homeless Australians report experiencing mental health challenges. Trauma often precedes homelessness, and once individuals are unhoused, their conditions frequently deteriorate due to unsafe environments and lack of access to care. Treatment options are often inaccessible, reinforcing a cycle of instability. Secondly, we look at systemic inequality. Homelessness is not just a result of individual misfortune, it's deeply rooted in structural barriers like housing unaffordability, chronic unemployment, racial discrimination in housing, and insufficient welfare support. These barriers make it extremely difficult for people to break out of homelessness without broader policy and societal change. Lastly, the social justice imperative reminds us of ethical responsibilities, especially as a future social workers. Access to housing is a basic human right. It is vital that we advocate for those experiencing homelessness by addressing systemic oppression and actively working to challenge power imbalances in society. These three areas together emphasizes the multidimensional nature of homelessness and why it demands a critical intersection.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about structural theory and discuss why the system matters. I want to explain why understanding the system is important when we try to address housing issues. First, let's talk about the housing shortage. Around 640,000 low-income households in Australia face major challenges. They are either homeless, living in overcrowded homes, or paying more than 30% of their income on rent. Next is rental crisis. More than half of low-income renters spend over 50% of their income on rent. This leaves many of them struggling to meet their housing costs every month. The gap between rents and wages is also growing. In the past year, advertised rents increased by 9.1%. At the same time, wages only grew by 2.7%. This growing mismatch is pushing more people into housing situations. Another issue is welfare rules. Current asset tests for rent assistance can disqualify people who own a modest car or have small savings. These rules deny vital support to those who need it the most. So, finally, what does this mean for practice? As social work students, we can advocate for more social housing. We can also push for fairer welfare rules or even campaign for rent increases so that it can be tied to people's income. Now I will discuss, according to the feminist theory, how gender shapes homelessness. First, I want to say that there is a strong link between gender violence and homelessness. In the past year, 38% of people seeking homelessness services were actually fleeing family or domestic violence. This shows how violence is a major driver of homelessness for women. First Nations women face even more risks. They are up to 10 times more likely to experience homelessness if we compare to non-indigenous women. This happens because of the combined effects of racism, sexism, and poverty. The gender pay gap also plays a big role. Women in Australia earn on average 13.4% less than men. This makes it harder for women, especially those who are single or part-time earners. They can't afford rent. Let's also look at a positive example. Safe Steps in Victoria helped over 10,000 women in the last year. These women received crisis housing, legal advice, and counseling. Programs like this show how targeted support can make a big difference. So, the takeaway here is clear. We need to create services that address trauma and respond to women's specific needs. This includes providing legal help, safe housing, counseling, especially and designed for women.
Thanks, Ashik, for passing the presentation to me. Now, I will talk about housing as a human right. Under the Universal Declaration for Human Rights and International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, everyone has the right to safe and affordable housing. But in Australia, there is no federal law to enforce this right. As a result, over 116,000 people are homeless on any given night. In contrast, Finland treats housing as a legal right. Since 2008, they have used a housing first model, giving people permanent housing without conditions like sobriety. This approach has reduced homelessness by 40% and over 4,000 people have been permanently housed. This shows that recognizing housing as a right, not a reward, leads to real change. Now, I would like to give a local example of Housing First in action. In Sydney, a pilot program gives unconditional permanent housing to people who are chronically homeless. It also provides integrated services like mental health support, job training, and addiction support. The results are also amazing. 85% people stayed housed after 1 year of the program, and it saved around 15,000 Australian dollar per person by reducing use of emergency services. This program reflects both structural and human rights-based approaches. It works with the NSW government to expand affordable housing and ensures people are supported with dignity. It's a clear example of how rights-based models can effectively work in our own context. Now, I would like to request Pritam to present the next slide.
Thank you. Rethinking intake intervention and engagement can transform three-lens analysis into practice. Holistic assessment must include relevant information about individual. It is necessary to conduct a structured interviews where client rental history, experiences of market discrimination, and welfare interaction will be displayed alongside screening for domestic violence and mental health. Housing First is a globally adopted best practice to challenge the homelessness issue. When this program collaborates with other agencies like tenancy sustainment or mental health counseling or vocational support, secure a significant house retention rate. Also, as a social worker, we can educate our client about their legal rights so that they can challenge the punitive asset test or discriminatory rental refusal through a legal process. And finally, we need an effective cross-agency partnership. Community legal centers are successfully overturning unfair welfare rulings, restoring clients' access to rental assistance. Meanwhile, partnership with community housing providers can facilitate a first-tracking client into social housing. So what we can take out from these sections, they are basically adopting a structural lens to avoid individual blame, promoting relational advocacy, engaging in policy literacy and systems navigation, building a cross-sector partnership and collective actions, and challenge the stigma and reframe dominant narratives. Now, I would like to call Roy, who will be leading us through the final section. Thank you.
So, let's wrap it all up. Critical practice frameworks offer up opportunities and challenges for rectifying the wicked problem of housing. But what's a wicked problem? At least according to Longren and Van Poek, a wicked problem is a complex and multifaceted problem that's difficult to solve due to the interconnected nature of all its different elements. Wicked problems have no clear solution. We've talked about just some of the elements of housing stress in this country today. It's definitely a wicked problem. There are lots of different things impacting upon it. In spite of that, what are some of the opportunities that we have as social workers to practice critically within this space? Well, first off, we can advocate for policy change that seeks to rectify the structural disadvantages that we were talking about before. Secondly, we can provide tailored support to women in order to rectify patriarchal elements of housing stress, like domestic violence and pay inequity. And finally, we can advocate for a cultural shift in Australia that sees housing as a human right. But what are some challenges? Well, people need housing tonight, which means we're going to have to weigh up long-term versus short-term gain. There's a tension there. Where do you put the money? Housing is seen as an investment in Australia. This is definitely going to be a challenge. There are a lot of people who have a lot of money tied up in housing that would like to see the value of housing go up and up and up. And finally, Australia has what Watts calls a neoliberal welfare state running on empty. This means that tools that we need to solve this problem, like the public service, are already really underfunded and not working very well. That's a big challenge too.